Welcome to the Power of Design podcast, where we have inspiring conversations that explore the intersection of architecture, construction, and real estate, so we can understand the dynamics and trends that shape an exciting and powerful built environment. This is your host, Jack Osa. Today, in the Power of Design podcast, I will be talking to Willy Stewart. Willy is the founder and CEO of Stewart Engineering. Willy has grown his business from a small team of structural engineers to a 220-person firm with 6 offices and 8 practice areas, including civil engineering, landscape architecture, geotechnical, and construction services. I admire and respect Willy not only because of his business success, but also because of his character and overall approach to living an exciting and purposeful life. Like myself, Willy is also a first-generation immigrant from Colombia, who gives me inspiration and motivation to continue growing and expanding my own design firm. Take a listen. Willy, welcome to the Power of Design podcast. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Great to be here. Thank you for the invite. I'm very honored.
So, Willy, in the past 25 years, you have dedicated your life to building a very dynamic and successful engineering firm in North Carolina. What is the single most important lesson you have learned during those years?
You know, the one thing that I have learned, which we are now really integrating heavily into the company, is building a culture, building that's about people, that it's about building trust and transparency and clarity. Within that, incorporating and weaving in the whole concept of, humility and respect and actually accepting people for who they are. So it's really, and getting people that want to do that, getting people that want to join your team, that can align with those values and not necessarily be just about only the work. The work we're going to do ultimately is how we treat each other and how we work with each other.
Yeah, and that's a very relevant conversation. In the most recent podcast that I've done, and always ask the question, I will ask eventually about what's the biggest challenge your clients face, to different professionals. And 99% the answer is client retention and attraction. So I think, that focus on culture and the people is what makes that difference and creates that magnet for the people you want to work there.
So our values, here is the acronym is THREAD, and it stands for trust, humility, and respect, which is culture, which is people, right. And then excellence, accountability, and discipline, which is the work and the operations and the business intelligence. And as Patrick Lencioni in his book, The Advantage, said, organizational health comes with the ability to integrate culture and business intelligence. And that's what we're trying to do here every day.
Nice. We'll talk about more about that topic later. But I'd like to know more about you. Where do you come from? You're my favorite guest because you're from Colombia. But why don't you let me know about, little brief history about how you got here?
Yeah, so I grew up in Barranquilla, Colombia, up in the northern coast. I went to an American school. It just happened that several of the teachers in my high school were graduates from Western Carolina University.
Wow.
Yeah, from Callaway, North Carolina. So there was a connection between my school and Western Carolina. So it made it easier for me to sort of come to the States and sort of get into Western Carolina, and I did. Yeah. So I went there for a couple of years. Played golf and played soccer for the teams there. And then I wanted to always, since I was probably in about the 8th, 9th grade, wanted to be an engineer, and primarily a structural engineer. So it made that transition from Western Carolina. One time I was thinking Georgia Tech. If you're in Colombia, you know about Georgia Tech and the Ivy League schools. You really don't know at the time back in the 70s. You wouldn't know about, what's happening in North Carolina. So, but then you hear about NC State and what a great school it is. So I went to NC State and got a degree in civil engineering. And right away stayed and got a master's degree in structural engineering. So that's how my ending up in North Carolina happened.
What did you do after you graduated from?
So I went to, I wanted to go back to Colombia. It was always sort of the plan to go back. And but in the 80s, it wasn't necessarily the place that a lot of people were going back to. As a matter of fact, a lot of my friends were leaving Colombia. So I decided to stay close because my parents actually still live in Colombia. And so I moved to Miami. And I worked for 3 years there as a structural engineer and decided, to move back to North Carolina. So in 1987, I came back and worked for a structural engineering consulting firm in Durham, small firm. And in 1994, started Stewart Engineering, which we'll talk about in more detail later.
Yeah. So what kind of projects did you work on that last firm?
So I was doing, I worked for them the 2 summers that I was doing, that I was at NC State in grad school. And right away they threw me in and I was, doing, drafting and designing primarily schools, a lot of schools, banks, churches, 1 and 2 story buildings, across probably the eastern part of North Carolina.
And at what point you decided to start Stewart Engineering and why?
So, I was a partner in the firm, actually. The name of the company was Gardner, McDaniel, and Stewart. But right around 1993, this is my 2 mentors. I love them. They really, in fact, I was talking to them about them today in the class that I was teaching here at Stewart, about the purpose of what we did, that it was more, it was beyond just designing beams, columns, and foundations, but actually, the true infrastructure of buildings where people go get healed like hospitals or they go pray like churches and the sort. So I really had a love for that. But at the same time, technology was coming. And I was the youngest in the group, and I decided, it's time for me to buy a cell phone, and return phone calls from clients while I'm doing inspections and the sort. So I started by myself in 1994 in a room about the size of this conference room, and the plan was to become, grow into a 10 to 12 person structural engineering company. That was the goal.
Yeah, and then what happened?
I talk to people about the difference between chance, fortunate, and lucky. And chance is the roll of the dice. Fortunate, in a way, is where are you born, right? Are you born into a family where you're nourished and loved and you have enough income to send you to college, or you're born in the projects and it's a hard thing to get. So what size of the railroad tracks? Are you born in a tribe in Africa? So that's just fortunate. Mm-hmm. Lucky is what you do with the opportunities that come your way, because they will come.
Yes.
And then you have to decide. So I am a 10, 12 person structural engineering company 2 years later. And one of our architect clients said, hey, we love working with you. We have 2 schools coming and, we're looking for a civil engineering firm. Would you want to do the civil engineering? Grading and stormwater. Mm-hmm. And I have no idea. I'm a structural guy.
Yeah.
So at that point, I have 2 choices. I say, no, I'm a structural engineer, thank you. Or yes, and then go figure it out.
Right.
So I said yes, and I figured it out. I hired a guy. And then we had a structural engineer who had was a bridge certified by designer by NCDOT. And he said, hey, if we hire another bridge guy, we can actually offer services to NCDOT. Yeah. I said, yeah. Why not, right? So next thing I know, we're doing structural, we're doing civil, we're doing, bridge design, and that, that was 1996, 97, 98. Then we started doing surveying, and we started doing, we CEI work for the DOTs, and that became into construction services and material testing. And one that lucky chance evolved into where we are today, which is a company with, I think we're at about 220 people. We have 8 offices and 8 practice areas.
Yes.
And frankly, the only one that I really know about technically is structural engineering still. But I have, you hire the people, you empower them, and they come in and you train them as leaders, and they succeed.
So it seems to me that being lucky is when opportunity meets your preparation to really take advantage of that opportunity.
Absolutely.
And tell me a little bit more about when you face that, let's say when they ask you about the civil engineering and you had no idea and you said yes. Tell me what was going on in your mind internally and that balance of taking the risk but also trying to be responsible. You probably didn't have the money to hire the person or not. How did that work in your inner world?
Well, so the reality starts with the ability to build strong relationships with your clients and with the people that you work with. And those are relationships that are also based on the values that we have here at Stewart. So you do great work, you treat people extremely well, you service them. So this architectural firm in Rocky Mount said, listen, if you could do for us in civil engineering what you're doing for structural, we'll give you the work.
Yes.
Right? So that's the lucky part is that, but the preparation, just as you mentioned, came from the work I've been doing up to that point. Right. And then that happens. And it's been like that. It's a number of different things that have happened over the last 25 years. The way we started our sports and events practice, the way we started our surveying practice, our municipal planning practice. I mean, these have been those opportunities that came from relationships that we had with either architects or municipalities or the clients that liked what you did and they could trust you.
Right. And what do you think are the main differences that you started realizing that take to run a business versus being an engineer? How to grow a business. What were those points where you said, oh, wow, this is about the people, or I need to pay attention to systems or processes or, all the aspects of growing a firm?
I can tell you exactly when that happened, which is really interesting. You would ask the question. So we have about 60 people now in the company, and I'm a structural engineer. I didn't go to CEO school, right? So, but there was a friend and colleague and competitor by the name of Mike Creed from McKim & Creed. Mm-hmm. And I invite Mike to lunch one day and says, Mike, we're having a planning session coming up. And man, I'm telling you, I'm somewhat it's so over my head right now. How can you help me? He said, Willie, I tell you what, we worked with a consultant out of Charlottesville, Virginia. His name is Ben Hennion. He's retired now. And he said, and he's worked with a number of companies in the AE industry. Let me give him a call. So he gives this consultant a call, and I hook up with him. And he came in and he did an assessment of our organization. We did training, and then he became my coach for 3 years. So he basically took me through CEO school, how to put in place the systems that you mentioned around how you manage people, how you create and put in place a structure around accounting and IT and HR and marketing and branding. And then how do you do one-on-ones? How do you, train people to manage them and to motivate them? And all those things back in 2005. So here we are, 2019. We're still using a lot of those systems.
Oh, yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, because I guess the foundations are just human behaviors, human needs. People always need to feel appreciated. They always need to feel that they contributing to something bigger than just the work that they're doing, and that's applicable to any type of businesses.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's interesting because as I grow my business, I realized how when you go to any education path for any profession, they teach you the craft, but they don't teach you the human part around it, which you're gonna need other humans agreeing with you and willing to go with you to do those things. And even maybe when people go to just business school, they don't have the context of the actual craft, and they might not understand the craft itself, and maybe they don't know how to apply those business concepts.
Right. So in 2009, right about late 2009, this consultant called me up and said, "Hey, I'm going to retire. I'm retiring, and I have all these systems, and I got all this intellectual property. Would you be willing to take on and help me with this one client in Richmond, Virginia?" Well, it was right in the middle of the recession, and frankly, I was bored. Yeah. I was, unfortunately letting people go, dealing with banks and all that, and I said, "Sure." So I started working with him with this one particular client, and then I got another client, and then I got another client, and that by the end of 2010, I was working with 6 companies, and these were manufacturing companies. There was a contractor, subcontractor. I had a company in New York City, one in Pell City, Alabama. So I did management consulting with him and his which we were using already at Stewart for a couple of years, and then I created a lot of stuff on my own. So I love to create around employee engagement, emotional intelligence, natural behavioral tendencies, and all that. And so I did management consulting for about 4.5 years. And exactly what you said earlier, somebody that graduates with an MBA, they have the book knowledge. Yeah. I had I have already put this systems in place. Right. So I had that knowledge, and I was running a company, and I had seen issues and problems, and I've had to let people go, and I had to deal with banks and lawyers and all that. So I was bringing that to the conversation with these new clients, in addition to having this sort of engineering focused sort of background.
Right. And I think that the engineering mindset, it's also a really good, I will say, like a thinking tool to solve business problems, because we see things different ways, as designers. For me as an architect, when I'm working on projects that are not specifically architecture, when I'm helping clients with strategies or doing more design thinking workshops or trying to solve any problem, I use more design thinking framework to see the problem from a different point of view. And usually that process that is so common to me, because that's what I do every day, is not that common when you apply it to other businesses.
True. And I am sort of that engineer left brain, but I love creating sort of templates and concepts around business culture. Yeah. And a lot of that came from working with 30 companies, and the first question about the challenges. What I learned through 4 or 5 years of doing this is that most challenges that CEOs and senior leaders face are not process, are people. Yeah. Is engaging the people so that they can buy into the culture they're trying to create. And that's where I came in and sort of brought not only to them what I had learned, but also I learned from them the good and the not so good that I brought back when I came full-time back at Stewart.
Yeah. So I usually think that designers and architects, sometimes we put too much credit on built space. When we talk about like specifically workplace design, we create these beautiful spaces and we say, this is going to drive your performance up. And it's just one piece of the puzzle. I think you gain nothing with a great space, but a horrible culture. Yeah. The people will not be engaged. Right. So that's why I became more interested in all these other human aspects, because the idea is to create the perfect experience for a person. Because when you enter the professional world, you're probably gonna work 40 years, 40 hours a week, 40 hours a week in an office space. So most of your life is spent in that setting. So it's very critical that it's designed to you. And I even would like to see a place where the workplace is designed to help employees achieve their full potential within that organization.
Right, and you're right. So we got a beautiful space here. We got a beautiful space in Raleigh, and we try to take that across all our offices. I mentioned those two because those are the largest in the company. But at the end of the day, and you made a comment about it, people want to be engaged. People want to be valued. People want to be trusted. Highly engaged culture creates tremendous value in so many different ways. And Gallup, they do polls around employee engagement, and a highly engaged culture is gonna lead higher productivity, profitability, customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction, less defects, less safety issues, all that because highly engaged people get hyper focused. Yes. And so therefore and here's the thing, they're passionate. I'll call it, and I was just talking to them earlier today. I want people to come to work at Stewart on the balls of their feet. Mm-hmm. I want them to come to work here because they know that what they're creating is meaningful, is significant. Yeah. It's the infrastructure of buildings, and I mentioned it earlier, where people go and get healed, like hospitals or bridges and roads that connect communities and parks and all that. This is what we do. Now we have to grind it out sometimes, through that design. But the ultimate sort of the outcome of all that is actually driving by there and seeing something you did right there and people enjoying it. That kind of purpose, that kind of significance that we talk about here is more important than anything else. Even though you got to have the latest 3D modeling, Revit, you got to have great spaces with lots of natural light. You got to have all those things because, frankly, during the recruiting process, this is what people are going to see. But once they're here, retaining them and helping them grow and be the best that they can be is the ultimate goal of who we are and what we do.
We'll be right back with more from the Power of Design podcast.
The Power of Design podcast is brought to you by OSA Studio, a multidisciplinary design firm focused on creating impactful experiences through the power of design. We partner with our clients to create buildings, interior spaces, brands, and strategies that help you deliver a successful project. As a minority-owned firm, we are committed to building a diverse platform of curious and driven design professionals so we can together pursue our full potential. For more information, please visit us at www.osastudio.com.
How do you deal engaging 3 different generations? Because I guess you'll have people of all ages. So you may have some baby boomers, you have X generation, you have millennials. We all don't fulfill the same. We need different things. How do you approach that difference?
And that's a great question because we do deal with that. So I am a baby boomer. So, in the first 10 years of my career, working 60, 65 hours a week was like the norm, right? This is like, I wouldn't think anything else of doing that, right? The millennials today are not in that, that's not something that they're looking forward to it. And frankly, we don't want them to either, right? Because we don't do it anymore here, right? So the idea of efficiencies, the idea of technology, but you have to also think that we can generate design today at a speed that would take, we can do it in 1 day, what it would take us back then, 2 weeks, right? It's just crazy. And we're very highly in the technology world, and do a lot of stuff with innovation in that space. But so, we recognize that and people will talk about this whole work-life balance doesn't exist and you can't really do it. And I said, listen, it may not exist as I'm going to spend this many hours here, this many hours here, this many hours. But if it becomes part of your culture, that is important to respect, people outside of this office, and we encourage people to actually go and volunteer as part of our culture. Not only volunteer with the nonprofits and with the other, whether it's the chamber and the sword. Not only, I want you to lead. I want you to take what you're learning here, take our thread principles and take them outside of this company and be the best that you can be. And we give them, the time and to do that as well. At the end of the day, efficiencies, accountability, and discipline comes into play to get the work done within a reasonable amount of time, whether it's 40 hours, 42 hours. And I say, listen, deadlines come. You may have to put in 50.
Yeah.
They're like, what? I say, yeah, or 55. And it doesn't happen often. It really doesn't. I mean, I sometimes I was in the office Saturday picking up my computer, and I walked around, and we have 110 people in our office in Raleigh. There was not a soul on a Saturday. And I'm walking around with a big smile on my face. I said, this is really cool.
Success.
I said, yeah, well,
Yeah.
People are with their families. People are on vacation. People are doing what they need to do, getting recharged. Now, when they're at work, we want them to be engaged in the work. We want them to be really efficient in what they do.
With all the practice areas Stewart has in-house, you guys are very engaged with the local design and construction industry, touching many different projects, different architects, different building types. How do you see the design and construction industry evolving in the future?
Well, we see that, and this started back, at least in North Carolina, in the early 2000s, when the whole concept of CM at risk was brought into the procurement process, where you brought in a contractor and working side by side with a design team and working with the owner and developing budgets and constructability advice and the sort right from the beginning. It was very, like I said, in the early 2000s. It was early. There was a lot of issues, but it's become pretty much the norm in many ways. How the projects are delivered today. Now we have integrated design, IDP, and we have 3Ps, and we have all these different ways where it's not necessarily a bid only kind of way to do it, but bringing all the players together. Especially now you have Revit, and you can actually do the three-dimensional design of the whole structure under one set of files, right? And then you can hand them over and work with the contractor, who can then even give it to the steel fabricator, who puts it in their automatic beam machine, and they create all these integrated processes that are helping eliminate errors at the same time, create more clarity about cost and about schedules and budgets.
Yeah, I think there is a lot of room for growth in that area, because we talk a lot about collaboration in our industry, but I think the next level is integration, real integration. And once you overlay technology on top of that, the advancement is exponential. When you have 3D printing, VR technology, BIM modeling, there are some companies that I've seen that they're now doing design, architectural design, engineering, construction. They develop their own software to do their projects, and they're also manufacturing the actual pieces of the building, which is full integration. You go to them, this is what I need, and the same company delivers everything, and they manufacture the light fixtures, the toilet fixtures, the walls. So they're kind of strategically buying companies that they perform all those extra services that they don't have yet. So it's a very interesting, especially 3D printing, because when you think about that, eventually you're gonna be able to 3D print a building, or in sections or pieces of a building. The possibilities are endless.
Well, and like you mentioned earlier, we have a number of different disciplines within our organization that are working. We call it our interdisciplinary collaboration. And it's our civils and our landscape architects and our geotechnical engineers and our structural engineers and our construction management and surveyors. And we offer that. to the clients, just because it's not to say it's just we're one-stop shop. Is that then for them is, okay, well, I don't have to worry if the geotechnical or the surveyor gave the proper files to the civil, and then I have two different companies, under one company. I suspect that you guys are collaborating internally to eliminate, budget issues or schedule issues of the sort. So that is one of the things that we're talking about, that integration of services, as an offering. And sometimes we in the past, that this whole commoditizing of services, of design services, we gotta get beyond that. I mean, we gotta get, it's all about, frankly, the value that we can give to a client needs to be also done in such a way that it's affordable. And I think there's a book called Blue Ocean Strategies and Blue Ocean Shift, and they talk about creating a blue ocean where you actually give more value at a better cost, which is not necessarily what happens today. Sure. But so, there are some blue ocean and out there and industry disruptors. They're coming. They're coming. And we can't be the BlackBerries of the world. We have to be able to think, with that sort of integration in mind.
Yes, and that disruption is happening. I heard once that there are three types of people: people who make things happen, people who watch others making things happen, and people who wonder what happened. So you have to decide what kind of
where are you gonna be, right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. You're gonna be an early adopter, or you're gonna be the wonder. I understand.
I like to talk about branding. I do a lot of brand design with my firm, and I've always been very focused on looking at brands, how brands evolve and interact with their clients and what they represent. And what I love about branding is that branding is somebody else's perception of you or your service or your company. It's almost impossible for you to know your brand. It's what they tell you, what people say, what you are. That's the brand. And I've noticed along the years that Stewart had evolved the brand. Like, I remember the circle with the S in title blocks many years ago. But I see that Stewart keeps evolving the brand, which is what it should happen. You should. People expect you to grow with the times, and overall the image, it's very refined and very appealing to architects. Sometimes engineering firms, they don't pay much attention to their brand. Maybe because of their mindset and how they work, they don't think that's important. But I always seen that Stewart always, you go to the website, looks good, clean, to the point. You look at the logo, it's evolving. There is a message. It's very coherent and very appealing to your target customer, which one of them are architects like myself. Tell me about, how do you guys conceptualize the brand? What's the intention behind there? How do you keep evolving that brand throughout the years?
Here's the thing about brand and brand, and you're right on. Brand, I've always talk about it in the company, and we talk about brand is the gut feeling that someone has about your services and your products, right? And it's an emotional connection with who you are, right? And it's said that when enough people get that gut feeling, then you can say that you're branded, right? So it's not just a logo. It's not just the name. It's, I call brand is the alpha and omega of the company. It's all by how the receptionist greets someone that comes in the door, how the office looks, whether we're using all the standards. And like you said earlier, in our standards are very specific. We're very serious about maintaining the look and the feel. I can tell you that over the years, I've called our survey manager, our construction inspector manager, because our trucks are not clean. If I see them on the road and they're not clean, I get on the phone. Hey, what's going on, right? And they will say, their excuse, well, Willy, it's Thursday. We clean them on Monday. But no, my point being is that even those little things.
Oh yeah, you're sending a
matter.
message.
Absolutely. I don't want to do business with somebody who shows up at my house with a beat up truck. I just don't. If
Yeah.
they can't even take care of that,
Oh, yeah.
and I'm going to give them, my sort of my resources and pay them to do something. So brand is absolutely important to everything we do. We have a brand promise, that it's on the website. And part of the brand promise talks about our clients. So our clients set the bar. Yeah. And then what's our job? We need to look at what that bar is, and we have to raise it. We have to give them no less than what they want and better, right? So all those things are part of what we've created in this organization.
One of the popular topics nowadays, it's about diversity, diversity, inclusion. And you and I, we're immigrants. And we're like right at the center of that conversation. At least I feel it very close to me because, I'm a first generation immigrant. I've been given a lot of opportunities. I'm a U.S. citizen now, and I really feel that this is my country, my city, and this is my place and my community. And many people talk about the topic without really understanding what it is or what's the impact of diversity and how it goes beyond, you have different look, you have an accent, and you have different food, but what's beyond that? What do you think it's going to really change the conversation about diversity, in our industry and in our environment?
Jack, you're talking about something that it's near and dear to my heart. It's one of our 8 strategic goals in our company, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusivity. And I am in charge of that particular goal. In fact, I talk about it. I do talks about it. The whole, for me, it started many years ago when I was doing management consulting, and I had somebody working with me, an African-American young man, and asked him, tell me about diversity. In your mind, what does it take to feel like we're making progress in that arena? And he said, Willy, it's very simple. It's one word: intentionality. If we're not intentional about diversity, about equity, about inclusivity in an organization, in our community, it's not going to happen. If we just let it sort of just happen by itself, it's not going to happen. So to give you some examples of what we're doing at Stewart, like last year, we did a full analysis of our salaries across the company for each job. We look at where everybody was regarding their tenure and title and the sort, and we compare what our women, our minorities were making compared to what our white employees were making. And we did an analysis. And you would think that me being from Colombia, that would be sort of, I was, not to say shocked because it wasn't that bad, but we had to adjust salaries of at least 2 people. Yeah. And I was kind of like disappointed that actually I found it. But that's what we're talking about, intentionality.
Right.
We're talking about, we're teaching diversity. We're teaching about unconscious biases. We're teaching about microaggressions. We just talked about them today.
Yeah.
What does that look like, right? When somebody walks into the room with a different color, with a different dress, with a different way their hair looks, or an accent, and what is going through your mind of the person in the room? We're talking about the microaggressions that happens often in meetings where women get talked over by their managers, or there is this roll of the eyes or the body language. We're talking about all those things. We're celebrating diversity every single month. So we're at our monthly staff meetings. So every month, based on what the federal government has, so one of the month, we actually do posters and we put them around all the different offices. February was Black History Month. March was Women History Month. So we had a poster that had the different women in history that have actually changed the world, right? June was Pride Month. LGBTQT month, and we showed, what that looks like, and we had posters. Next month is Hispanic Latino month.
Nice.
Last month was Veterans Month. Because it was, July 4th. So, but not only we're putting these posters, we're putting them on our TVs, we're talking about it. So, and frankly, I do a talk about how do you become extraordinary as a person. And the first thing that I discuss, and I frankly, we talked about to our staff today, is about the authenticity of who you are and the fact that every single one, is a gifted individual with talents and experiences that nobody else has. So, come to work, come to us. It is safe to come and work here with who you are.
Yeah.
Whether you're Latino, whether you're African American, whether you're Asian, whether you are of a different sexual orientation, Stewart is a safe place to be. But you got to talk about it. You got to let people know, right? You got to put it out there. And some people may feel uncomfortable, but it's okay. Because, this generation is a whole lot more accepting of the difference that exists among our people. And my gosh, man, it is in this diversity where great decisions are made. If you got 6 people with the same thought, the same color, making a decision, more than likely will be one decision.
Yeah.
By now, let's think about 6 people of different colors, different genders, different cultures, different age groups. Now you're discussing a subject. You may have 6 different opinions. Yeah. Then you can debate, right? You can have some ideological conversations around the differences that each and every one brings to the table. It is real. Diversity makes people better. Make companies better.
Yes.
No doubt about it.
Yeah, make communities better.
Make communities better.
Yeah.
But we have to be accepting. It's unfortunate that we're finding ourselves in a time where this conversation has gotten somewhat sideways.
Yeah.
And I hate that.
Yeah.
I just don't want to get into politics, but I hate the fact, as being from Colombia, as an immigrant who was given, tremendous opportunity, and frankly, we've given back in economic development to the state of North Carolina, with 200 plus people, the taxes that they pay, the houses they buy, the cars. I mean, we're giving back as a boy from Barranquilla.
Willy, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you coming down here to meet me. I also want to take the opportunity to thank you. You have been a role model for me and a mentor, and I really appreciate that every time that I ask you something, you're there to help me. And I look forward to just continue being in touch and helping each other.
Jack, no, thank you. Thank you for asking, and I'm just impressed with what you're doing. These conversations are not only important for our profession, they're important for our community. So I think we can expand beyond just a design piece, but all the community piece. And so what you're doing is fantastic, and I commend you for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Power of Design podcast. Remember to rate and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Find out more about Jack and Osa Studio at osastudio.com and follow us on Instagram at the Power of Design podcast. Thank you.